everyone. Welcome to this talk on immersive technologies in education. We will split this talk into two parts. In the first part, we will talk about broadly what is the role and advantage of using virtual technology and other immersive technologies in education, along with a brief overview. In the second talk, we will go over the input, output, and like hardware requirements and challenges and so on. The same. So let's get started. So, before we start, we need to make sure that we all have the same understanding of what we mean when we say immersive technologies in education, right? So, here's a broad categorization of the types of technologies that are involved here. So, on the one hand, obviously, there is virtual reality, which is complete immersion and complete simulation. So, if you find any immersive technology places you in a completely simulated, computer generated world, that is what we would call virtual reality. On the other end of the spectrum, we have augmented reality, where you're still looking and interacting with the real world, but there is information overlaid on top of it, information that is augmented on top of it. So that will be augmented reality. And again, this is a spectrum. So somewhere in the middle, you would find mixed reality, where you have like uh, elements of the real world being mixed with elements of simulated worlds, and all of them, being seamlessly overlaid on top of one another. So somewhere in this spectrum, like all of the immersive technologies that we'll be talking about today will lie. And for the most part, we're just going to club them all together and just call it VR. But uh, we will all understand that when we say VR, we mean any technology that is anywhere on this spectrum. Applications. So this is a very quite a new and nascent field, and already like the applications are, like as far as we can imagine, there's a lot of potential applications that are being explored or yet to be explored, and so on. Like with many technologies in this type, games have been quite at the forefront of developing applications for VR, and it's also pushing the state of the technology and the cutting edge and all that. Followed very closely in this case by education because of a few reasons. Also, yeah, entertainment, vocational training. You can see there is a lot of potential applications for this technology, and this is only going to continue to grow in the years to come. For the purpose of this talk, we'll be focusing on the education aspect of the applications of VR. So obviously, we all know that tech market, especially in countries like India, is growing at a phenomenal rate these last few years, and it is showing no signs of slowing down either. We all know these numbers and digital internet connectivity and things like that, hardware adoption. Countries like India can be world leaders in this because of all of these things lining up for us. And yeah, however, if you look at the state of the edtech market today, we see the innovation in edtech is happening along three key types. Three types of innovation in edtech that we see. One is you take traditional learning approaches like Blackboard, classroom based teaching, and you add reach to it. You add the reach of the digital connected world, and you get something like a Byju's or a Khan Academy or EdTech, EduTech, sorry, Vedanta, all these things. On the other hand, you can take traditional learning, break it down into bite sized approaches, like tailor made, custom made courses, 10-minute per, almost episodic content. So this is another way to revolutionize edtech, and this is again what we see in things like Udemy, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, and all these things. And finally, we have what we call adding simulation to traditional learning, gamification to traditional learning. So things like Roblox, Code Kingdoms, all these companies. This is a fairly new and hard to explore kind of territory, but that is again taking off more and more these days as we find that children or students engage better with this kind of treatment. So the next innovation in tech could actually come from the combination of two of these pillars, specifically these two. So you take traditional learning, you add reach to it, and you gamify it at the same time, and you get combination of traditional and simulated learning, which would be what we call immersive learning or immersive teaching. And here's where immersive technologies have a big part to play. Now, why should we even bother about immersive learning, right? Like, because the like as researchers or as teachers, as educators, or as anybody who has a stake in this market, we need to always ask ourselves: is immersive learning going to make learning itself better? Is it going to improve the lives of students? If not, like why even bother, right? So, broadly speaking, here's like four aspects of not four aspects, I would say four considerations that we need to see, which will convince us whether or not immersive learning can make things better. uh, yeah, the first one is something called the cone of learning. So this is a very old theory. I'm sure everybody here has seen this. It was first postulated or conceptualized by Edgar Dale in his popular 1969 paper about how much of information is retained X amount of time after learning it. And as we all know, the passive forms of learning, such as reading or just hearing and so on, those rank further lower or they're worse than active learning. So participation, doing it, hands-on approaches, these always tend to work better. And by definition, like immersive learning techniques, they tend to fall towards the better end of the spectrum. So we already know by decades of education research that learning through participation, immersive learning is going to help retention in the mind of the student. The second is this is a characteristic of the human mind, right? We all know, like by evolutionary biology, the human brain, we are very bad at remembering lists, enumerations. Like a list of any data is very hard for us to retain. But on the other hand, we are very good at memorizing spatial information. This is probably due to our ancestry from monkeys living in the trees and so on. We are very good at remembering spatial information, very bad at lists. Yes, we are also very good at memorizing stories. That's probably why we are empathetic social beings and so on. And there is evolutionary advantage to be had there. So this is what we know, which means of the different kinds of information delivery, the ones that have the better and better retention in ascending order are lists, worst of the lot, mind mapping, mind palace techniques or mental palace techniques, and finally contextually placed information. Now again, immersive learning tends to fall somewhere towards the right end of the spectrum, leading one more time to better retention. The third consideration is something I call projection attenuation. So, try and ignore the specifics of the example here, right? What I'm trying to say is, whenever information is presented, the information, the information exists in the natural world in some n number of dimensions. Like, for example, in the case of the solar system, it is a three-dimensional, mega structure. And when it is being presented by the teacher, it gets flattened out to two dimensions on the blackboard. Then it comes back in the student's mind in three dimensions, and the student has to reproduce it in an exam or somewhere in two dimensions again. There's a lot of projection up and down the dimensions happening. Now again, I say solar system is three-dimensional, but it's not. It's actually, there's multiple dimensions of information that you can overlay onto the solar system, because it's a very complicated system, right? There are just three dimensions of space, but there's more dimensions of information. Now all of this needs to get projected down onto two dimensions when the teacher has to present it. Now every time there is a projection up and down in terms of the number of dimensions of information in the information space, there will be some loss. This is just inherently lossy process. Now, if the source material, the higher the number of dimensions source material, the higher the losses could be more and more significant. Immersive learning doesn't completely solve this, but it does give us one or two extra dimensions to work with in each of these cases, thereby reducing some of the projection attenuation to manageable levels. Fourth point is about empathy. So there are again there are many uh, parameters to the development of empathy, especially in the early formative years during the education years. And some of those are having shared experiences and developing the ability to switch perspective, see things from other person's shoes, and so on. And finally, withholding judgment. The first two of these, immersive learning can definitely help with this. I think it is quite easy for us to imagine how this would be so. If not, we will see more of it in some of the future examples later. So, coming back, pulling up a little bit, if we had to define for the probably we should have done this earlier to set the context. When we say immersive learning, this is what I want us to define it as. It is using virtual and augmented reality teaching or learning platform. Okay, it is a virtual augmented reality teaching or learning platform that complements traditional teaching methods via immersive content that utilizes elements of simulation and gamification. This, this is what it is to me in my mind. It's a lot of words, but I think it tries to capture the essence of what immersive learning should be. Now, we've seen how immersive learning can probably help improve learning outcomes and so on. Now, for a minute, I just want us to sit and imagine, because this is important, right? We are at the ground floor of a new nascent technology revolution. Just want us to sit and imagine different scenarios or different applications of this particular immersive technology in education, and just see what we can imagine, especially from focusing more on the K-12 experience here, because that's what I'm more interested in. But just imagine you're in a physics lab. Imagine from the point of view of the student, right? Like instead of learning about rocket equations, orbital mechanics just on a blackboard and then trying to solve, you could actually build out these rockets. You could try out different configurations. You could try out different configurations, not just for the rocket themselves or the chemical propellants or whatever. You could even try it out on different planets. You could even alter how gravity is supposed to work, and you get to play with it as though it were a toy, and then you're also learning similar something like as complicated as a DC motor, like an internal combustion engine. These are all inherently very 3D structures, and instead of just reading about it, you can actually see how it works, mess with it. Put your hand in there, stop it, pick it up, pull it apart, put it back together. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Going back to our chemistry labs, a lot of chemistry is very conceptual, uh, and it becomes quite hard for students to imagine some of what is going on. But with the help of immersive technologies, we can make so they have access to shrink down to the molecular level, see what is going on, maybe even go subatomic, maybe see chemical reactions happening in real time, and so on. Also, chemistry labs are expensive, and uh, in a country with as diverse an economic situation as India, you can't expect every school to have a chemistry lab and so on, right? But if we have a decent enough chemistry lab set that can be simulated in virtual reality, it doesn't matter. Every kid has a chemistry lab now. Natural sciences. Yeah, just imagine one of the assignments is a field trip to the Natural History Museum, and then their assignment for later that day is they have to write about what they saw in the Natural History Museum, like a field report. Pulling apart the human body, it's like operation, but uh, virtual. less expensive, and so on, and can be so much more real. You could go on field trips to the African savanna, do marine biology exercises, everything from from just your headset, and that setup. The humanities, yeah. Imagine you're studying about some military operation, some war. You could actually be hovering above a zoomed out, a map spread out all around below you, and you could see the army troops mustering, you could see the troop movements, the formations, you could see it out playing out in front of you in real time. Or maybe you're on a field trip to perform some archaeological excavation in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and then you come back and you write about what you saw. It just makes those experiences so much more meaningful. It's just going to remain with you forever. Or one of your field trips, you could actually visit people from a different part of the world, like starving kids from Ethiopia. Say you could go virtually, or have simulated conversations with them, maybe canned conversations. You could laugh with them, dance with them. It's just going to make that experience very, very powerful. Just, yeah. And again, right, not to be cliche, but yeah, the sky is the limit here. And I just want all of us to like take a minute to like imagine what kind of immersive applications we could build using this technology. I'm just going to take a real quick pause here, and we're going to come back in the next video and talk more about the milestones that need to be achieved for virtual reality and other technologies here to make their mark in immersive learning. Thank you very much for coming to this part of the talk. See you again in the next video. Thank you.